This is the Uncommon Success Podcast, where we explore topics about success and dive into the stories of leaders who found success along the way.
And success isn't easy. It takes some grit, a little bit of luck, and a whole lot of patience.
We know that success comes in many shapes and sizes, and we're exploring them all.
So get ready for a journey through the remarkable stories of individuals who face challenges head on and learn many lessons along the way.
From business moguls to artists, educators to industry leaders, entrepreneurs to athletes. If it's an uncommon success story, we'll cover it.
The Uncommon Success Podcast. Real stories, real people, real success.
This episode is brought to you by Learning RX. Does your child struggle in the classroom or with homework? Learning, especially subjects like reading and math, doesn't start in the classroom. It starts in your child's brain. If your son or daughter is having trouble learning, then their cognitive skills may need strengthening, and Learning RX is there to help. Research shows that long-term learning issues can impact students for life, so the value of a strong learning skill is priceless. Your child's time is the one asset you cannot return. Investing in your child's future and making the best use of their time as a resource is urgent. So don't wait. Give Learning RX Shreveport a call today and set up an assessment. Their certified brain trainers can help your child by improving a lack of focus, slow processing speed, and long-term memory. So give them a call at 318-797-8523. Again, that's 318-797-8523. Learning RX, brain training, gives your brain a workout, helps kids and adults learn more easily and think more quickly, and also unlock everyone's hidden potential. Get started with Learning RX Shreveport today.
Welcome to episode number 3 of the Uncommon Success Podcast. Thank you for either watching or listening to this podcast.
Yes, and welcome to our community. As we're developing this community, we're excited to have everyone tuning in with us. And I'm your host, Andy Coates, and joined by my co-host, the mom who always has some kind of dad joke to tell, Miss Brinly Foxall.
Well, speaking of dad jokes, I was reading a book the other day about anti-gravity. Literally couldn't put it down.
Oh my gosh. Well, before this gets too crazy, out of control, let me introduce everyone to our special guest who's joining us today, the head coach for Glenbrook School in Minden, Louisiana. The great Coach Reagan Smith is with us today. So welcome to the studio, Coach.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
We're so excited you're here. And I know one of the biggest reasons you're here is to hear me say one more dad joke.
Man, I couldn't wait. When I heard about it, I was ecstatic.
Yeah, like why am I not a stand-up comedian? No. Okay, so why was Cinderella bad at soccer?
Something to do with the shoe?
Well, she always ran from the ball, and she couldn't keep her shoes on. So that's a problem.
Oh, gosh. Coach, look, we never know what's going to happen on this show, and so I guess this girl just needs more to do. So I'll tell you what, I'm supposed to read your bio, Coach, but I'm going to actually let Brinly read your bio for us, since apparently she's got plenty of time on her hands. So why don't you take that away?
I'm about to brag on how great you are. Here we go. All right, Coach Reagan Smith has one of the highest football career winning percentages in the state of Louisiana. He brings a level of excellence and innovation to his coaching by incorporating technology and modern performance metrics to help his team give a competitive advantage. Coach Smith actually began his career as a television producer and a cruise ship AV specialist. As a problem solver, Smith spent a few years bringing creative solutions to the real estate world as a realtor and investor. Then he stepped into his passion as a full-time coach. He has over 15 years as a football coach with 3 state titles, each with a different team, as well as another state championship as a player. He has helped over 40-plus student athletes earn athletic scholarships. And check this out. He has coached a lot of D1 athletes and has coached 9 current or former NFL players. He is currently the head football coach at Glenbrook School in Minden, Louisiana. With this methodical approach to player and team development and his innovative strategies in game management, Smith is a legendary coach in the making as he works to develop a championship-level program and at Glenbrook.
It's pretty impressive, Coach. I'm as a Glenbrook alumnus. I know I'm excited to have you on as the head coach now for Glenbrook, and I know they're excited to have you as the head coach as well. And man, we're just pumped and excited to have you on the podcast today.
Man, it's really great to be here, and man, getting the job at Glenbrook, just a real blessing. It came out of nowhere, and I was really fortunate.
Yeah.
And it's turned out really well.
Just finished your first season,
Yes.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Nice. How'd that go for you guys?
We finished the year 8-3.
Okay.
And we made it to the second round of the playoffs.
Nice.
We narrowly lost a second round game by 3 points. Really hard fought, and made tremendous strides. We had lost a lot of talent from the previous year's squad, and it was really up in the air what things would look like. And we answered, and that was really, really big.
Yeah.
Really big for the program, big for the kids to feel like it's, that it wasn't a flash in the pan, that they were actually a good football program.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's great for them, great for you, great for Glenbrook in general. I know for them that having that a new head coach is always a challenge for them, but man, I'm sure that having you at the helm now is pretty exciting for them as well for you. So
Yes.
and a new venture, I guess, stepping into head coach now for Glenbrook. So that's always a new, different approach, I guess, to coaching. But you've been in the game for a long time now, so
Right. 14 years as an assistant and becoming a head coach, you find out a little bit about the things that you didn't know prior.
yeah,
And so it's eye-opening. You get to see the things that you have to handle as head coach, and you grow an appreciation for what the head coaches do, and you grow an appreciation for the assistants as well.
awesome. That's cool.
That is so cool. Andy, can you tell us a little bit more about Glenbrook itself?
Yeah, for sure. Before we jump in too much of your story, would love to just let everyone know about Glenbrook a little bit here, and especially as that being my alma mater at Glenbrook School, I'd love to talk to you about it. Glenbrook is a leading K-12 private school in the Arklatex for developing well-rounded students. At Glenbrook School, they are on a mission to prepare students for a lifetime of learning and character building. Through rigorous academic instruction, unwavering accountability, and fostering a positive attitude, they create an environment where students thrive. Their focus is on cultivating a close-knit family of learners who collaborate in a safe and challenging atmosphere. They believe in nurturing dignity, enthusiasm, involvement, independence, and responsibility. At Glenbrook, they set high expectations, promoting cooperation to ensure their student not only meets but exceeds their potential. Be part of a school that's shaping futures and instilling values that last a lifetime. Visit their website, glenbrookschool.com, or give them a call at 318-377-2135. Enroll today and experience a culture of excellence in academics and athletics. Glenbrook School, building leaders of character, one student at a time. And I am one of those students who was built through Glenbrook.
There we go.
And you can take that for however you want to. The good, the bad, the ugly. It is what it is.
Y'all are putting Glenbrook on the map.
That's right. So my brother also is a product, and they probably love to claim him a lot more for his success and his journey over the years. I stirred up a lot of trouble back in my Glenbrook days, so I'm sure they don't always just say, yeah, let's, when they think back on Andy, it wasn't the fondest of moments. I caused just a little bit of havoc.
Maybe, but one day maybe they'll give you a key. That's how Bird, it was like a key to the city, like you arrived. Well, what do you love about Glenbrook, Coach?
The community family feeling. It's in a neighborhood where many of the kids from the neighborhood right down the street go to the school, and so it has this real neighborhood family feel, really unique as opposed to the other schools that I've taught and coached at. I've been on the public and private side elsewhere, but Glenbrook definitely has a very unique, like tighter knit feel. It's pretty refreshing. It's cool.
That's awesome. You know, that the administration there is really intentional, and they've been around for a long time, and they've focused on growth, and so having that consistency of administration, and now even some of the teachers. I went back. It's going to date me a little bit here. You probably don't know about this yet, but I just went to my 20th year anniversary, or was that your reunion for the school, and kids that were younger than me that have graduated are now, doing their 15th year teaching or something in the school. And I was like, yeah, I'm getting old now. If like the teachers are students who are younger than I was, but it's a great place, definitely, for sure.
Well, I know we've done a little bit of your bio, but can you tell us some of your foundation, your family, where you're from? Just dive into that a little bit.
I'm originally from Mansfield, Louisiana. My father is from Mansfield. My mother was from Texarkana. And I went to Mansfield High School through the 11th grade, transferred to Evangel for my senior year, went to Evangel, played for Evangel, won a state championship, kind of really solidified catching the football bug at that point. And I thought I wanted to be a sports broadcaster.
Okay.
Because no one's ever had that inclination before. And so I went to Bipsy and kind of went in that direction, fell into TV, and ended up on the news side for most of my television news tenure, 7.5 years. And then I left that and went to work for the cruise ships for about 1.5 years. And then decided that I was going to dominate real estate.
Okay.
And then 2008, real estate collapse, decided it was going to dominate me. And
So hard.
And yeah, it was really good until it wasn't.
Yeah.
And so at that point, I was kind of forced to ask myself, okay, if you could do anything, money doesn't matter, what would that be? And it was coaching. And so I said, okay, I've got to do this. And I set down that path, and I've been doing that ever since, 15 years.
That's awesome.
Mm-hmm. It's been really, I've been fortunate. I've coached some extraordinarily talented players, and that makes you a really good coach. When you coach a bunch of NFL guys, you end up being really good at coaching.
Yeah. Yeah.
Makes
you look really good.
Yeah. And
But you're the reason they are NFL guys.
oh yeah, I definitely had so much to do with that. Okay, so in reality, I mean, they're talented regardless, and you're never going to exceed the ceiling of talent on your team, but you do have to put those guys in a position to succeed, a position to excel, right? That's you can't make it a ton better than it is, but you can screw it up.
Right.
And so your job as the coach is to maximize. And that's kind of what I look at everywhere I go. Like, how can I maximize the situation I find myself in today?
That's good. By the time they get to high school, their talent's probably pretty well developed, and you're just trying to maximize what they do have.
They're going to have that raw talent. It's going to come into like fundamental sharpness, understanding the game. Every coach that I've talked to ever struggles with football IQ, just understanding football. Whereas when I was young, when you were young, there was like 3 basic channels on TV. You watched all of the game.
Right.
You played in the yard. You knew the rules. Today, with so many outlets through technology, kids don't watch the game. They watch highlights on Instagram, and they don't know as much football. They don't watch whole football games. I've asked the group, how many of you watched the LSU game this weekend in Louisiana? And 5 out of 40. Yeah. So
I would have never thought about that.
yes, that is
Wow.
the technological advances have created so many slices of the pie that you just don't get the exposure that you had 15 years ago.
Have you seen this to be true, that even our generation for somewhat is involved in fantasy football?
Mm-hmm.
So students, do they even root for teams anymore, or are they more rooting for certain players because of things like fantasy? Like, have you seen that shift a little bit?
I've seen a little bit of that. I just think overall allegiance in general is very, there's just not a lot of substance to it, that things are in such bite size 15-second chunks, there's not a lot of passion or attachment or I definitely think that there is, maybe more so than following fantasy football, it would just be attaching yourself to a superstar player, right? And I think we first started seeing this in basketball. It's like, I'm just going to follow LeBron wherever LeBron goes. That is my favorite team,
Right.
LeBron. And so you get some of that in the league now. People just follow a player.
Yeah. One of the things I think that is so interesting is that as generations change, how people interact, how students or adults even interact, you see weird shifts that take place. But one thing that seems to be very consistent over time is that there is still certain principles that apply when it comes to being successful. On this podcast, we're hoping to do is to try to explore those topics of success. We call it the uncommon success, mainly because we're both pretty uncommon. And if you get invited on this, it's probably because we think you're uncommon as well. Now, you can take that for however you want to.
That's
But
awesome.
we do like to explore those different topics. And today we're discussing is actually the topic of how to build that resilience and that grit. Traits and qualities that we think are important when it comes to success. And so before we jump in to hearing kind of your feedback on this, Brinly, why don't you give us a definition of resilience?
All right. Resilience is the capacity to withstand or to recover quickly from difficulties, toughness.
All right. And then how about grit?
Oh, I like this word. Grit is courage and resolve, strength of character.
All right, so that's kind of our framework today. As we're going to dive into some discussion, we're going to walk through your story some. That's kind of our framework that we're setting this up as, is building resilience and grit. So we're going to hit you with some questions here in a second as we walk through your story. But I love the grit part. Resilience, that you're hanging in there, pushing through, but then that grit, that courage and resolve, that strength of character, something that seems to be missing a lot in people as they're wanting the shortcuts into success and wanting the fast fame, and it seems like we're missing something. So we want to dive into your story a little bit here. As you've walked through, you've worked with a lot of different athletes over the years, and you've probably seen the full spectrum of athletes over the years, and you could see that thing that certain students just had that was beyond just talent that led to success. And so we want to hear some of their stuff. We want to hear about your story. So we're going to dive into some questions. So, Brinley, why don't you kick us off here with the first question?
I'm excited about this one because I think maybe we were here at the same time. What year was your high school championship, state championship?
The one I won as a player? 1996, December of 96.
Okay, cool. So I was at school then, so this is kind of fun. So now I get to see your perspective of it. Tell us about that first championship as a high school player. I know that's so exciting. And then what you learned from those experiences and your takeaways that kind of shaped you and propelled you forward.
All right. What the structure of a championship winning football team looks like. And I know that that's real, canned answer-ish, but to expand on that, when I got to Evangel, my senior year of high school, I'd played 3 years of offensive line, and Coach Dennis Dunn said, get in a stance. And I got in a stance as I had been taught at my previous school. And he's like, well, what is that? And I was like, how I've always been taught. Right. And he fixed my stance that day. And I've said it many, many times. I learned more in my first 2 or 3 days of practice at Evangel than I had in the previous 3 years of football elsewhere. And so you got this profound moment of this is what coaching is.
Yeah.
And by the end of that year, I played with a bunch of extraordinarily talented players. And so I did not start. I was not a starter. I did not play meaningful reps or anything like that. But what I did do is I learned technique. I learned how to play the game. And I was actually able to teach the kids younger than me in the last weeks of the season how and why I was doing the things that I was doing that was working.
Yeah.
And so I guess that was the first moment that I was like, hey, I can do this a little bit. And it was effective because all of those guys I was playing with, it was a lot of the younger, I was a senior, they were juniors, sophomores, but I would say an incredible percentage of those guys were starters the next year, the year after that. And that team that I was on at the time was the first Evangel team to go undefeated. And then they won 60 games on the field going forward for the next 4 years. So, like, when I say I wasn't a starter, but I was blocking for Brock Berlin in JV games to learn the scheme. And he ends up being the Gatorade Player of the Year, National Player of the Year, that sort of thing later on.
Yeah.
And many others, just, all around, everywhere, really, really good football players. And it was that eye-opening moment.
So you go from winning a state championship, being part of a football team, and your career, as you jump into your career, you get into television, production, technology, but still there's that just drive and desire to be a coach. So how did that season of working through that production, how has that shifted and changed and maybe even advanced and helped your philosophy of coaching, having that background?
Well, working in television, you start to learn how to, tell stories, deliver information, promote things, and the evolution of technology during that time frame. That's right around 2000, 1, 2, 3, and kind of the beginning of the information age. You learn in a rapid time, how do I reach people? How do I change people's perspective? How do I educate people in mass, so to speak? And so a lot of what I did in television, whether it's leading a team for a newscast, the producer's kind of the head coach of a newscast.
Okay.
All right, you decide what goes in the newscast, what doesn't, what's newsworthy, what isn't, what order, how do we stack the show, and you have complete editorial control of that show. So if a reporter goes out and does a story, they come back, they let you read the copy, and you adjust that copy however you see fit. And then they go voice it, and it's edited and all of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And so you're kind of the head coach of that newscast, and then you time the show. The 5 o'clock news starts at 5, it ends at 5:29:30 or whatever.
Yeah.
And so it's down to the second. And so you're in charge of all that. And so I think you take a piece of that with you, and then you take also the ability to market something. And for me now, it's my players, but I use those same skills that I learned in marketing the show, marketing our news personalities, et cetera, in marketing my players. And the biggest skill that you learn in television as a producer, I would assume as a reporter, is researching. I don't think people realize Google searching is a skill.
Yeah.
It's not one search, it's not one word. It's, how many different ways can I ask this question for this information to get more information about what I'm searching for. And so the amount of research that I learned to do really helped me going forward as a coach, and how to push those players out there, research and find, these colleges, how do I find the email address of these coaches, et cetera, and then send out emails of videos and video editing and highlights and all of those things. So it dovetailed a lot more than people might think.
Yeah. So what I heard from that was he did that during the early 2000s, late 90s, early 2000s, which was Y2K. So if anyone was responsible, Brinly, I don't know if you know what Y2K even is.
I do know what Y2K is.
I
was prepared.
You were ready for it?
I was ready.
So what I hear is that Coach was probably responsible for that.
Probably.
That was his,
Or he saved us from what
yeah,
it was supposed to
right.
be.
That's right.
Like he saved us.
Those 2 digits, man. Those two digits. HBO's actually doing a special about Y2K. Like, it's coming out like right now.
Really?
I want to watch that. That sounds exciting.
Yeah,
That's so
all of the 4x3 computers, tubes,
Yeah.
and all of that video from back then. It's pretty interesting.
I have to take a look.
That sounds interesting. Okay, so we've got 3 state titles from 3 different teams. And so from each of these football programs, how would you describe like the takeaways from that and how that shaped you? If you could describe one word for each team, or if there was like a theme.
West Monroe was my first state championship. I was an assistant offensive line coach. There were 25 coaches on staff, which is unheard of.
Wow.
At the high school level. Most high schools somewhere around 8 or 9. And so there were 25 guys on staff. And
It's like one-on-one coaching almost.
yeah, and belonging. Like Don Childs did a great job of making me feel like I belonged there.
Yeah.
And as a brand new coach, and I ended up being the scout team offensive coordinator, if you will, for the defense. So like I was the scout team offense coordinator, and I haven't seen much of this anywhere else. This was groundbreaking. The defense and the scout guys and the scout coaches came in on Sundays and all watched film of the opposition. And so you got to see them, up front, what they did, how they did it, what it looked like. It was already cut up and everything like that. So it was already organized, and you knew what you were emulating on Sunday night. And so you come to practice Monday, and you're just really prepared to emulate that. And at that point in time, I was like extraordinarily obsessive. And so I would come up with ways that we could communicate within the scout team to do things really fast. And the defense didn't know what we were doing. And it enabled us to deliver a really effective, efficient picture to the defense. And this was the craziest thing. So if you went into a playoff game and you were dominant and you got way ahead, and so at the end of the game's out of hand or whatever, we would put the scout team on the field and run their offense at them.
Oh, wow.
Yes, and that was intentional. That was a Don Childs thing.
Yeah.
This process was so dynamic, and it takes I think a 5A school to be able to do this, but the scout teams had their own uniforms that were not West Monroe colors. They had their own team name, everything. You had the Wrecking Crew and the Bandits. The Wrecking Crew was the defense, and the Bandits, that was the scout team offense. And it was a combination of black and yellow. And it said the team name on your jersey and all that kind of stuff. And I don't think it was a mistake that the jerseys were black and yellow, which is Neville colors.
Okay.
Nobody ever said that was a thing, but I mean,
a big rival, I guess.
Big rival, yeah.
Yeah.
But I kind of drew your own conclusion. Who is the most, irritating rival or whatever, and so yeah, once the playoffs started, some kids got shifted over to the Wrecking Crew or the Bandits, and that's what they did.
Wow.
And they ended up awarding a best player from each group. It really well done, and I attribute a lot of their success to that because that's uncommon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So that was I guess the first state championship was with them. Mm-hmm. So just belonging and I guess preparation.
Yes.
A big factor.
Yes.
What was your next state championship with?
Evangel. With Evangel, I would say innovative, unique, Christian principles all came together to create a bond and a belief that you could be better, and then just profound success. All of those things come together, and it's you just know that you're destined for something different. And then I left there and went to Logansport, and so I was able to take some of the things that I'd learned at West Monroe, some of the things I'd learned at Evangel, and put them together with my own thoughts of how to improve things. And I was only the offensive coordinator. And I say the word only, I'll adjust in a second. But my head coach allowed me to instill a lot of those things. The head coach, Kevin McGee, was very gracious and helpful in saying, yeah, do that, do this. I ran the strength program. I was the offensive coordinator. And so we were able to really put those things into practice.
Yeah.
And so when I got to Logansport, they'd won 2 games in 3 years. The first year we won 7. And then the next year we won 8 and went to the quarterfinals. And then the last year I was there, we were undefeated, 14-0 state champions.
Wow.
That's so cool.
And so that would be the 3rd state championship. And I definitely attribute that to understanding all of the things that would help us get to the next level.
So just, I have a question for you here. Before I even get to that, just I'm curious. You go from there's West Monroe, which is in a larger city in the state of Louisiana, that had a lot of resources, large school. Evangel, decent sized school, decent resources in a large city in the state of Louisiana. And then Logansport, where not a large school, not a large city, but still go and they win a state championship. So what was probably like a difference maker in that group of guys that you saw? Even as we're talking about resilience and grit a little bit here, was there something that was just different in that group?
Yes. All right. So in 1995, Logansport won a state championship. And this kind of calls back to what I talked about earlier, like this exists. And so a lot of the, dads, uncles, grandfathers, whatever, from that era were, their kids, their nephew, their cousin or whatever was playing on the Logansport team that we were coaching. So for those kids, they had heard the stories. They had heard the championship stories. So it was real. It existed. Even though you'd only won 2 games in 3 years, it still was something that happened here. It was not impossible.
Yeah.
And I definitely think that was something that helped us when we came in as a staff. We all came in as a staff together. Those kids understood I had done it. Coach McGee had done it. He had won the championship there in 95. And they were being coached. Kids know if they're getting coached.
Right.
All right.
Yeah.
They know. They may not know everything, but they know that, this makes sense. I'm learning something, et cetera, et cetera. And so I think that was huge in getting that program moving forward fast.
That's good. So we're talking about resilience and grit here, that toughness, if you will. What was for you in the journey, and you were at other schools as well, not just those, but over 15 years of coaching, what would you say was probably one of the most difficult moments where it took a lot of resilience for you?
It's really easy.
Yeah.
All right. So we won the state championship at Logansport in December of 16. And then after that, I got offered the offensive coordinator job at Parkway High School. And Parkway had 2 highly, highly recruited offensive players, Justin Rogers and Terrace Marshall. Justin was a quarterback. He was a 4-star quarterback. And Terrace Marshall was a 5-star wide receiver. And everybody knew who they were in this area.
Yeah.
And so I get this opportunity to go coach them at a 5A program in the Shreveport-Bossier area that's well known. And so we go up there, and week 1, the quarterback gets catastrophically injured.
Oh, man.
And then week 2, the receiver gets catastrophically injured. And so you go from having the best quarterback and the best receiver in the area to nobody, that was planned, that had planned on taking that mantle or anything like that. I think the thing that gets overlooked in high school football, okay, if I lose my best receiver, some guy almost as good doesn't step in. It can be a catastrophic drop off. Well, in this case, it was this was really hard. Our quarterback gets hurt. His replacement was our second best wide receiver. Our best receiver gets hurt. Well, now my number one receiver was my number three receiver.
Right.
Well, I mean, you've played high school football. Number three receivers in high school football just generally aren't ready.
Right.
And so it made it extremely difficult to wrap your head around so much drastic change so quickly, so unexpectedly, so emotional. It was very hard, and I don't know that anyone's prepared for it. So when the receiver got hurt in week 2, my phone rings at halftime, and it's Steve Ensminger on the other end of the phone. He was the offensive coordinator at LSU at the time.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Hey, are you okay?" And he said, and I said, I've never seen anything like this. I've never heard of anything like this. And he said, "That's why I'm on the phone. Are you okay?"
Wow.
And so, yeah, it was just like really,
Could you go from a state championship season to like
undefeated,
right.
State champion on top of the world, to in this place where like we're just going to have to totally reinvent, and there's no real way to reinvent anything close to what you were anticipated to be.
Yeah.
And one of the things I will say is that once expectations are set, and these expectations for these two guys and this team were so lofty, state championship, set records, all that kind of stuff, fans have a extraordinary hard time resetting those expectations. It's just not something that people do. Once the expectation is set, they can't come off of that.
Right.
And so, yes, it made it extraordinarily challenging. We ended up going 5-5 in the regular season, and we lost in the first round of the playoffs. And for the longest time, I wondered, what if I hadn't gone there? What if I hadn't taken that job, just stayed where I was? The Logansport team I left went undefeated in the regular season the next year, and the year after that.
Gosh.
All right, and so you're like, man, I could have been there and pushing for championships and been undefeated. But I look back on it now, and it took a long time to get where I am now, but it was necessary to grow. The facing adversity, facing pain, going through that, and maybe not handling everything perfect. Learning is messy. If you're truly learning, learning is messy. And so you have to go through those moments and, make some mistakes, have some failure to learn. Yeah. And now I know, if I'm put in any situation, whether it be something similar or just within a game, your best player gets hurt or whatever, you've got to let go of what it was and worry about what it is and do the best you can with what it is, and understand that might not be as good as it would have been, if you'd had your starter in the game or whatever. But it's like, what can I do the best right now? Yeah. And it's really hard to reset yourself for that. But that was a moment that allowed me to see that's something that you have to be able to do.
And that'll make you tough real quick. You had expectations, not only to these fans and these parents and these students, but you had expectations coming into these great athletes and helping to build this program. And man, that'll humble you and toughen you up real fast.
Well, I'm sitting here with a top 10 quarterback in the country.
Yeah.
And what was considered, probably one of the top 5 receivers in the country, and they were special, and at the snap of fingers, they were done. Yeah. And it wasn't like, oh well, we'll get it next. They were seniors. It was over.
It's so hard.
So a big part of the reason for a big part of the allure of that job was gone before it really started.
Yeah.
and that was, and having to find it. And I've talked to a lot of the guys that I coached from that team after those two guys got hurt, and I've told them, look, I wish I could go back and do that better. I wish I could go back and handle that better. And it still, I feel like, turned out, better than a lot of people would have prognosticated. I mean, to win, we went 5-5. So in that season, we played Pearl, Mississippi, who went 16-0 and was ranked nationally.
Yeah.
We played Pulaski Academy. They had the Coach Kelly that never punted, onside kicked every time and everything. They won a state championship, were nationally rated. And we played an Evangel team that was nationally rated. So 3 of the 5 losses.
Easy schedule. Right?
3 of the 5 losses were to like top 100 teams in America.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't your traditional 5-5. So, I've been able to get far enough away from it to, in time to look back and go, that wasn't that bad, considering who was on the other side. And what I started to learn from there was if I look back on my schedule and the teams that give us trouble or the teams that we drop a game to, you can generally look back at those teams and you either find somebody who was extraordinarily good or a player that was extraordinarily good. We don't just lose.
Yeah.
There's generally a reason things didn't go the way we planned. And I mean, that holds up when I look back. We lost in the quarterfinals when I was at Logansport my second year. They had a quarterback, Shaheem Carter, who went to Alabama, and he started as the star position on their defense, the nickel corner. And they had a receiver named Trey Palmer, and he's playing right now in the NFL playoffs at receiver for the Bucks.
Wow.
And so, I'm telling you, like when you go back and find teams that get the better of you, if you feel like you're doing it right, there's generally a reason.
Yeah.
You're generally playing really good players.
Yeah, and you talked a lot about kind of what you've learned in those seasons, but as you're going through those hard times, what's that key to staying successful, to keeping your head above water when you have all of that stuff?
Man, the thing I would say about everything, about what I do, about what players do, about everything, is consistency. High-level consistency.
Yeah.
Consistency in learning, consistency in addressing issues, consistency in answering questions, answering problems, consistently finding things that make you better. You've got to be consistent. And then you can't get to this place where, I've been doing this for X, Y, Z amount of time. Well, I know everything. Because as soon as you get there, the game passes you by.
Right.
And so it's a consistency in always finding ways to get better. It's the same thing with players. I had a kid that played for me at Evangel named Josh Thomas. Josh was 6'7", 330 pounds. But he had, factors that made it where he wasn't, great too. He struggled with quickness. He had a size 18 shoe, and he's 6'7", 330 pounds. And he went on to play at the University of Houston, started some games and all of that stuff. The reason I bring him up, he's not the best player I've ever coached, but he might be the most consistent. Because he, the thing that would frustrate me about Josh was the thing that made Josh great, is that he was always an 8 on a 10-point scale. He was an 8 today. He was an 8 tomorrow. He was an 8 the next day.
Yeah.
He was rarely ever a 10. And he was never a 7.
Yeah.
He was an 8. And that will make you better than guys that are 10, 4, 9, 3. The consistency. If I can put all 8s on the field, I win every time.
Right. So kind of speaking of players a little bit there, and even those traits, you've walked through many state championships. In fact, let's just see those rings real fast. Before I jump in, you got a couple of them on here, brought the others with you. So there's a few of them right there. So
Yeah.
3 as a coach,
All right.
1 as a player.
So these are the 3 as a coach, and it's kind of like a little timeline, right? So West Monroe was first, and then Evangel, and then Logansport, and it all started off with me as a player at Evangel.
And that player ring's not quite as big as them coaches rings. So,
Everything evolves and gets better,
Yeah.
you know. And so
all of that tells a story. They all
Right.
have stories behind them, and you've learned a lot in your own journey through that. So when you're working with players, you as a championship player and coach, been part of multiple teams that have reached that level of success as a champion. What are you emphasizing to those players? Because not all players are those consistent 8s, like you were saying.
Mhm.
So when you're trying to build those quality characteristics in those athletes, what are you kind of emphasizing to them? What are you
all
as a
right.
coach?
So first and foremost, I mean, obviously, we talk about education in the classroom, right? But beyond education in the classroom, it's education on the field, in the weight room. What I want to do, and this kind of goes back to the first couple of days with Dennis Dunn at Evangel, is I want to be the coach that I would have wanted, right? And so I want to give them as many answers as possible to everything. One of the things I pride myself on is weight room work, like the fundamentals of lifting, working out, nutrition, sleep, all of those things. Things that I would have loved to have known at 14, 15, 16 that I didn't learn until, somewhere between, 23, 24 and now.
Yeah.
Well, I accelerate the situation and really talk to them about the details. I have this mantra: focus, effort, details. It's how you get fed. Focus, effort, details.
There you go.
All right, and
I like that.
And so we're gonna focus on everything, right? Like intent. You don't just happen to focus, right? Focus requires intention. So I've got to intentionally focus. And then I've got to put effort into everything, whether that's planning, what to eat, when to eat, how to work out, how hard I go, all that kind of stuff. And then if you worry about the little details, nothing ever big slips by. And that's almost something I learned in television news, like, the little bitty grammatical errors or whatever. If you're always worried about not making those little errors, big errors don't happen.
Right.
And so if we pride ourselves on the focus, effort, detail, we become consistent and we become successful.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's what I'm looking for in everything, whether it's in the weight room, on the field, teaching, stance. I like to think of myself as a coach that coaches the millimeters. And this drives me insane. Coach will be like, block him. You got to block him. What does that mean?
Right.
All right. Like, I've got to teach that kid how to block him.
Yeah.
All right. And that doesn't mean, you just step toward him. No, I've got to know, all right, when I get in a stance, how much weight do I put on this leg versus this leg? Do I need to be 80, 20, 60, 40? Is the weight on the ball of my foot? Is it on the heel of my foot? Is it on the inside of my foot? Where is it? Where am I triggering that foot from? Is it coming from my teardrop in my quad? Am I bringing my hips through first? What's happening? What is the physiological chain that's going to take me to make this block, right? And I want to teach all of those things all the time, like just ad nauseum, and be consistent. And then, shockingly, guys, when you leave no room for error, you make less errors. And instead of getting frustrated because we didn't do something, now you eliminate a ton of that, and they go and make they make their blocks. They go and execute what they're supposed to execute. It's hard to do that every day. Like, it's hard to get up and go and operate at that level every day. If it wasn't hard, then we'd all be good.
Right.
Yeah.
And so it definitely, there's a demand there to push and to always be high level consistent. and get all those things done. And that's what I'm doing in every aspect of the program. One of the areas that most high school teams just don't take advantage of is technology, right? And I mean, it's real buzzy to talk about Huddle, which is the cloud-based film platform for high school football, but just about everybody has Huddle now. Now it becomes more, how do you use Huddle, okay? And beyond that, how do I implement how do I implement technology into my weight program? How do I implement education, through technology to my players? We have an app that all of my players are signed up for that I'm able to disseminate information right now to everybody. In the way that education uses the Remind app, there's sports apps that allow you to push out not just instructions, but video, pictures, just anything you need, inspirational quotes, keep things top of mind, that sort of thing. There's workout software. One of the things I'm kind of dabbling in right now are different explosion speed monitoring platforms. There's one online now that allows you to set your iPhone up on a tripod and monitor your lifts, and it translates that into bar speed. And so now I'm able to actually see how much power and force I'm applying to a bar in real time.
Wow.
And through that, you can actually, kind of create a max metric from utilizing that information, right? Like, okay, if I put 135 on the bar and I move that bar, to the top of my range in 0.7 seconds, and then tomorrow 0.65, I got stronger. And that's like real-time feedback instead of just like a one-rep max. And maybe I didn't get the carbs I needed today to be at the peak. This is like, I can tell that I'm peaking
Right.
in that moment. And so these are the things that I think make you better.
Yeah.
It's basically everything all at once in every direction consistently.
Yeah, and focusing in on those details that are helping those athletes succeed. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Coach, obviously there's this level of investment that you're making in your players, and it's more than just practice. So let's take it off the field. Can you share us something memorable, like this coaching moment of you impacting your players off of the field?
Off of the field, I'm going to go back to Josh. Just after Josh graduated and went to Houston, he would come back and visit, and we would talk about things. And I would dispense advice about life, like how to handle things moving forward, and where you can go, and what does my life look like, and how would I have done things different? Like picking up the past, dusting it off, and selling it as something new. But it helped him become what I would say in many ways is more successful than me. All right, so Josh is about 28, 29 years old now. He is the offensive line coach, run game coordinator at Spring Creek in Houston. They went to the state championship game this year in 6A Texas football.
Wow.
And he's married to a Houston graduate who is applying for her CPA right now. And so to put this in perspective, Josh and his three brothers lived with their mother in a 3-bedroom apartment on Uri Drive. And to go from that to being a teacher and coach in 6A Houston football, married to a future CPA, that's pretty drastic.
Yeah.
And I kind of feel like, obviously, there's many people that have hands in that, but I believe that he would tell you that my advice was helpful in getting to that point. Yeah. And so when people talk about, football and where it can take you, it doesn't have to take you to more football.
Right.
It can just take you to success in life.
Yeah.
And that would be where I feel like I've made an impact off the field.
what's been very impressive to me just in the time, a little bit of time I've been able to know you, Coach, is that off the field investment. Just this past year, I watched you take a student you drove him up to Colorado to a school he's, getting ready, doesn't come from a lot of income, not a lot of money in his own family. And so you took the time and resources and drove him up there, which is just that extra bit of investment. And now when he comes back in town, I saw just recently you guys connected up, and that extra bit just matters. And kind of in that same bit of realm, what advice would you give to maybe those aspiring leaders who they're aiming to try to achieve some level of success? They're trying to grow in their journey. Just knowing the journey you've walked through, what would be that piece of advice you'd give to those aspiring leaders in regards to like the impact that you can make in others?
All right, so this is another thing that's difficult. It's hard, okay? And I don't always do this, and I should do more of it. But you get what you give.
Yeah.
All right? And so if you do something out of the ordinary, uncommon, to help, something adjacent to what you're trying to accomplish, generally that comes back.
Right.
Like, just like you're saying, like driving Amarion Miller to Colorado to get ready for, his first summer camp ever for the University of Colorado football, taking kids to camps. A lot of these kids that I helped come from low income situations, and they just don't have the means.
Right.
And it doesn't mean that every kid that goes to a camp becomes this incredible college football player. It's about experiences and seeing more of the world and pushing yourself and all those things. And if you just consistently go above and beyond, I think that that comes back to you in some way, in an above and beyond way. Yeah. That would be my advice that I would give, is like, don't be afraid to do things that other people aren't doing if you want to be different than other people.
Right. We all remember those investments that those people have made in our lives that are that little bit of extra that wasn't necessary, but it definitely had a lasting impact. All right, Coach, what we're going to do now is we want to hit you with some, we call this our rapid fire section. So we're going to hit you quick on some questions, get your quick, just off the cuff, immediate response to them. So Brinly, fire away with our first rapid fire question for Coach here.
I love this section. Okay, what do you love about this current season of life that you're in?
The ability to change a program completely in a more dynamic way. And the challenge of, steering the ship. It's just, as an assistant, as an offensive coordinator, as an offensive line coach, I'm able to implement very detailed, very specific things that have almost instantaneous results.
Yeah.
As a head coach, that doesn't happen a lot. The changes you make are more long term. You don't see instant result, and that's challenging, especially when you have gotten instant results in other areas.
Right.
And so, but I like the unknown, what direction are we going to push this thing, and how, and just seeing it grow.
That's good. All right, so we've been talking about resilience and grit here. So over the past 15 years of coaching, what would you say has been the greatest lesson that you've learned in that journey? It doesn't necessarily have to be with resilience and grit, but because of that, the ups and downs, the highs, the lows, the tough and the easy seasons, what would you say has been the greatest lesson you've learned through all of that?
It's still in process.
Okay.
Being okay with yourself and making decisions and understanding that it's not always going to be perfect.
All right, next one. Who invested in you the most over the years?
Gosh, my wife. My wife's played a huge role in being kind of the the yin to my yang. She's a lot more grounded than me, and kind of keeps me from going way out there.
Yeah.
And so that's extraordinarily helpful. Just her perspective and the way she looks at things. My dad basically got me started in football. He wasn't a coach or anything like that, just loved football. And so I picked that up from him. He is the reason that I'm here in this capacity. And then my mother was a teacher, and she taught for 30 years in mainly the second grade. And she was a really polished educator, and that helped me understand how much of a difference maker that can be.
Yeah.
So you put all those three things together, you get to where I am today.
Yeah, love it. All right, so the $1 million question is what I have it written down here for me as is, let's say someone was listening right now, and they had $1 million they wanted to invest into your program right now. What would you do? What would you use those resources for?
Whew, that is so tough, because there's a bunch of different directions you can go.
Yeah.
Like, you're like $1 million. Well, you know what $1 million will buy you? A turf field.
Right.
All right, but then it's gone.
And most, if not all of it,
Then it's gone.
disappears. Yeah.
My initial thought is weight room
Mm-hmm.
equipment, technology, and things like that, because that is the single thing that, regardless of talent, that is the single needle you can move the most.
Yeah.
Right? I can make somebody incrementally faster. I can improve facilities to a very finite, way or whatever, but I can drastically change somebody physically through workout and nutrition.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where you make the biggest difference in your team. Obviously, I'd love to have a really nice brand new field house. I would love to have the turf field. And if somebody wants to give 3 or 4 million, then that's fine.
You won't turn that down.
I won't turn that down.
They're listening.
But the first thing is probably strength and nutrition, because that's going to have the most far-reaching effect.
Yeah, and it's directly straight to your players too.
Right. There's like, if we get the weight racks we need, the weights, bands, et cetera, the technology that goes into all of that, and that immediately impacts the program, and it doesn't go away.
Yeah.
Get them all on meal plans, prepackaged meal
Yeah.
plans.
Okay. So I've done this everywhere I've been, and most people don't. I don't know why. So when I was at Evangel, the first year I was at Evangel, man, we worked out so hard. And at the end of the summer, they'd worked so hard, they were just burning through muscle.
Yeah.
And so we looked like a distance running team. Nobody had any pecs or anything like that. And I'm like, man, they worked harder than any team I've ever coached. And they don't look like we looked at West Monroe or anything.
Fully
like that.
trained, but just didn't have the size.
And I was like, hey guys, we need to stop killing these guys for the first 3 months of the year and get nutrition into them. And so we had a donor who bought 2 pallets of ready-to-drink protein that I had suggested, because it was something I knew they would actually drink.
Right.
And so that next strength and conditioning phase, we got huge. I took that with me to Logansport, and we didn't have that level of donor. Now, Logansport still has like money, because the parish has oil and gas,
Yeah.
But we didn't have the money for 2 pallets of ready-to-drink protein. That's a lot of money.
Right.
And so I would buy powdered protein. This is insane. Like, even looking back on it, you want to talk about going the extra mile? So we would buy like bulk powdered protein, and I'd get a 5-gallon bucket, and I'd fill it with water. Okay. And we had a drill with a paint mixer. And then this was all me doing this. Like this was my idea. This is how we're going to do it, right?
Yeah.
And we have a drill with the paint mixer, and we put in the protein and bzzz, and protein for the team. And we did that every day. Okay, so you got to figure we did that, in 2015, going into 2016, and then we won a state championship. Now, I'm not saying that's the only reason, but
Right.
brother, everybody on the team gained 20 pounds minimum. Like I'm talking the smallest kid on the team gained 20 pounds. Nutrition, especially in underserved areas, is just like it's another place where you make this like dynamic jump.
Yeah.
And so we.
So if someone is listening right now, you would not turn down 2 pallets worth of protein. If they
No,
offered
not at
that to
all.
you.
Not at all. Okay, so we had a couple players. We had Langston Murray and John Stevens Jr. So Langston, his senior year, we filmed it. He did 20 reps of 225 on bench, and I tweeted it. Hashtag SC Top 10, Sports Center Top 10.
Yeah.
Well, it got picked up by like all of these different sports websites and whatnot, not necessarily SC Top 10. I mean, it got picked up by Max Preps. He was on the cover of Max Prep's website for like a day and a half.
Wow.
Him doing these 20 reps and everything like that. And it went bonkers. And, Logansport, Louisiana, there's pine trees. And,
Right.
and so he's, all over the country.
Yeah, it's a famous guy overnight.
Yeah, right. He ends up being a guy that, benches, around 400 pounds. All right. John Stevens Jr. was a receiver, and he was a year behind Langston, and we were developing him. Well, he ends up going to TCU. And when he steps on campus at TCU as a freshman, they immediately made him lift with the incoming freshman lineman because he was too much stronger than the fellow receivers. Like he went ready, you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? That was
Yeah.
that was something I prided myself on. It's like, when they'd go in the weight room, like, oh, all right, watch this. So John, and I can't remember the order, but like in his first, it was like his first off season, he benched 405, and then the next off season cleaned 405.
Wow.
405 pounds. He threw.
gosh.
He threw 405 pounds as a
Right.
receiver,
Right.
and so like that's ridiculous on a ridiculous scale.
Yeah.
So things don't work out at TCU. He goes to ULL. It's all right. He gets picked up by the Cowboys, and in the preseason this past season, he just went off, caught like 2 touchdowns or whatever, and just was really, really good. He was set to make the team and tore his ACL, and they still signed him. They still maintained him
Even
on the
with an
team,
injury.
like an injury designation
Yeah.
where he stays with the team. They still have his rights or whatever.
Yeah.
And so, but I mean, he's depending on who you ask, what website you go to, he's 6'5", 6'6", 220 pounds, and he plays receiver, tight end. Those guys, you don't get one of those at the mall.
Yeah. Yeah.
Guy can run real fast, 6'6", 220.
Right.
Like that guy's just not walking around. So they're real rare. And so he ended up, and this is something that comes from coaching, right? You see these NFL guys, and you're like, oh my gosh, he plays in the NFL. I'm like, if I see John, I'm like, hey, what's going on, beagle ears? And when he was like, his freshman, sophomore in high school, he had these ginormous hands. I measured him his junior year as 10 1/4 from the base of his palm, like huge hands, right? And when he was young, he would go to catch the football, and the football would blow his hands apart, like bloom, And I was like, your hands are like beagle ears. and so like literally, I can go up to an NFL football player and be like, hey, beagle ears, and he'd be like, hey, coach.
All right. Well, we have one more rapid fire question for you. What is next for Glenbrook football? And what about you personally?
I'm hoping millions of dollars of donation.
There we go.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's see what happens, Coach.
Field, massage chairs.
What's next? We are pushing the weight room technology, just different aspects of weight room technology, trying to really dynamically reinvent the way that we work out, and that's what we're in the midst of right now. And then hopefully that translates, down the line. It's not necessarily something that you see immediately have this extraordinarily profound effect, although it can happen.
Right.
That has to intersect talent, right? And so when the weight room efficiency and effectiveness intersects talent, you become really special.
Yeah.
And so hopefully that results in a state championship and a new way of doing things.
Yeah. It's good. And what about for you personally?
For me, it's kind of one and the same. I don't have children.
Okay.
And so this is what I do. And it feels gratifying, satisfying. I like the idea of building something, turning all the knobs and seeing what that turns into.
Yeah.
And so that's what's next for me, turning more knobs, seeing where we go.
Right.
I mean, that's what I want to do. I enjoy it.
Love it. That's awesome.
Well, we want to take a moment to thank our sponsors today, Learning RX and Glenbrook School.
Yeah, for sure. And also, thank you to Coach Smith, who's joined us today. Lives here locally in the Shreveport-Bossier area, but does coach in Minden, Louisiana. So thank you, Coach. He's going to stick around for a few minutes with us to dive a little deeper onto the concept of resilience and grit as we have a little discussion for our Patreon members. So if you are not a Patreon member, you want to join the inner circle, we encourage you to do that for as cheap as $7 a month. Brinly calls that the cup of coffee, right?
Yes, it's a cup of coffee. You get to be in the Cool Kids Club.
Be in the Cool Kids Club. So if you want to join our Patreon, go to patreon.com/The Uncommon Success Podcast. And for $7 a month, you can join that and just hear some behind-the-scenes discussions. It's going to be great. You do not want to miss it. In fact, last week we gave you a little sneak peek of what that looks like, and you won't get that sneak peek this week. So join the Patreon, and you can be part of that.
Yes, make sure you join that, but also follow us on all of our platforms. You can follow us on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube, so you can watch or listen. But make sure that you join us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. And it helps us out so much when you like, share, subscribe, and review. And also, please leave comments because we like to bring them up here, and we'll give you a shout out. And we like to, you can leave comments about how great I am and, whatever you want to say about Andy.
Yeah, for sure. We definitely need some great comments. We love to interact over those as we're trying to build this community. So feel free to share anything you like to. That Coach said that you want to bring up. He won't be here next week, so if you want to try to bash Coach, he won't be here to respond. So keep those comments nice, polite, kind. But we do want to hear from you, so please do leave those comments. Again, thanks, Coach, for joining us today. And join us next week as we dive into the topic of leveraging opportunities, some luck, and a bunch of action.
Absolutely. That's a wrap, everyone. Thank you for listening.
Yep. Have a great week. See ya. Thanks for being part of the Uncommon Success Podcast. Your commitment to growth fuels our passion. Special thanks to our executive producer, Jess Camp, and our technical director, Stephen Posey, for helping make this episode happen. Join us next week as we continue the journey towards uncommon success. Have a great week.